right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD, anxiety and anxiety spectrum disorders, and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed clinician specializing in the treatment of, OCD and anxiety and that sort of stuff, and phobias and things that make you nervous and stuff that makes you scared. All that stuff. Just the stuff that our brain tells us is true and probably isn't, but, you get the idea. Anyways, thank you all for joining me today. So the Fearcast is a question and answer based podcast where you, the listener, get to send me, the therapist, questions about OCD and anxiety, and I'll do my best to try to answer those questions. You can go over to fearcastpodcast.com and you can send me a question there. Go over to the ask or submit a question link there, and I will be sure to read it, consider it, and put it up on a future episode as I am doing today. So this question is one of those audio questions that I've been talking about. So by the way, you can send me an audio question, and it will, at least at this time, I will say it will get sent to the top of the list of things that I'm going to answer, because I think the audio question is just so much more interesting than hearing me read the question. So the best way to get those audio questions to me, you can record it onto your phone, record it on your computer somehow. You can through the Memo app or through Zoom apps or through anything else that happens to record your voice, and send it over to questions@fearcastpodcast.com. You can also send it over to me if you upload that to a Google Drive or some shared drive, and you share that link with me over at questions@fearcastpodcast.com. It would be great. Alternatively, if you record that and upload it to Google Voice, or not Google Voice, to Google Drive, send that link through the website at fearcastpodcast.com, and that will help answer a few of the questions that I would likely be sending you in advance if you do send an audio question. So I'm going to do a bit of a combination today. I know I've historically just been doing in the past month, been doing one question per episode. Today I'm going to do two. So these were two just brief questions, one audio and one just quick sent to me via Instagram, and thought it would be a reasonable one to put up. So I'll also say at the top of the episode, as always, I hope everybody's doing well. I know that I'm recording this after just coming out of Thanksgiving, and I hope everybody, at least in the States, had a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend. I don't think people outside of the world are celebrating Thanksgiving, but if you did, you probably ate a lot of turkey and probably ate way too much, as we Americans are wont to do. I know that I personally took a swan dive right off of my diet, and now I'm going to go crawl my way back and see what I can do by the end of the year. But either way, I hope everyone had a fun time with family and friends, either the family that they were born into or the family that they chose. I hope you all had a wonderful time. So I had the brief thought today to scrap this whole episode and do an episode talking about how to handle scrupulosity within Hanukkah. But alas, we are right in the middle of Hanukkah. And also reached out to Jed Sieve, who I was hoping to have on, but he also informed me that Hanukkah is kind of a low-pressure holiday within the Jewish community. So we scrapped that, and we're going to kick that off into the high holidays in September. So stay tuned for September of 2022. But I will be having Mitzi Van Cleve on in a couple of weeks to do an episode about how to handle the holidays, how to handle Christmas specifically for those who have religious scrupulosity. So that should be a fun episode. And to that point, if you have some specific questions that you would like to ask Mitzi Van Cleve for that episode, go over to fearcastpodcast.com and send me an email, or just send them to me, direct message me over at Instagram. I'm Fearcast Podcast over at the Instagram, so you can send them over to me, and I will read them, and I will throw them her way. I'll probably put a post about it as well. For all of you listening in the future, you missed your chance, but likely, if you have follow-up questions for her, message me anyways, and I will see if I can wrangle her back for that episode. So, all right, everybody, without further ado, here's the first question.
Hey, I've been been a long-time listener of the podcast and it has been a tremendous help in my journey. Just want to give out a big thank you before jumping in. So I've been doing ERP on my own for a while now, since I haven't been able to go to therapy, and also due to the fact that there's virtually no one in my country who specializes in ERP or OCD treatment. The first few months were okay, and I was managing it quite well and following advice from books and the IOCDF website. I have contamination OCD and reading OCD. I've been exposing myself to dirty surfaces and not washing my hands afterwards, or washing them as little as possible. I've also stopped all the rereading. However, now, but in the last 2 months, I've noticed that my obsession has changed, and now it focuses on my recovery to take to an excessive level. Now I go out my way not to wash my hands, even though we're still in the middle of a pandemic. But every time I'm forced to wash my hands when I enter a shop or something, I get real upset. And on some occasions, I even have like an anxiety attack and break down in tears, because my brain tells me that if I wash my hands once, then I'll do it twice, and in no time I'll fall back into my own patterns and wash them compulsively again. The same is true with reading. In school, I have to take tests, and I can't bear having to reread even just a small line. When I read instructions, I'd rather make up stuff rather than go back to read the step again. When I read labels, I would make sure to never reread, even if it's important stuff like the dosage. Now I feel as if avoiding rereading and washing my hands as much as I can feels more like a compulsion than a recovery process. No human can possibly go their whole life without rereading, not even once, or without washing their hands, not even once. It's just there's a very thin line between sanity and insanity in my mind. One misstep and my life could go back to OCD mode. And I hate not being able to read anything or going outside due to my fears. Can you give me some advice on this? And I do wonder if others also struggle with this during their journey. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks so much for sending in that question. So you've got a lot of elements within this that are really common and do affect a lot of people just across the world. So I'll try to hit some of those high points. I mean, you said the main concern you have is you've noticed that your obsessions have started to shift over into being obsessed about ERP, being obsessed about, and I'll expand that out, that for a lot of people there can just be this obsession about treatment in general. So I'm going to kind of approach that from that perspective, but that's one of the shifts that can happen for a lot of folks within treatment, is that their obsessions start leaching over and grabbing onto kind of the quality of their therapy, the quality of their ERP. Now, before I get into that, I do want to say, accessibility to treatment just across the world can be really, really tough. But I love what you said. You're using the resources that you have available to you. And there are a ton of great resources out there. So you are accessing this podcast, which that's great. I'm glad you're finding it. I'm glad you found it to be helpful in terms of you being able to learn a little bit about treatment, about what OCD is, how it can be worked, and trying to apply some of those things for yourself. That's great. Additionally, there are going to be other resources out there. There are certainly other podcasts. The OCD source is fantastic for obvious reasons. There are going to be a number of blogs. There are Facebook groups out there. There are some Reddit groups out there for some subtypes of OCD and OCD in general. I would say those forums are a little shakier in terms of the quality of their content. And if you spend any amount of time up there, you'll probably notice the disparity in the comments. Sometimes you'll have people up there who are genuinely interested in helping and have great concern, and also it gives some good advice. However, you will also find people up there who are going to give, let's just say terrible advice. Let's just say the worst possible advice that you could get for someone who who's struggling with an obsession or any sort of fear, or just terrible advice for living a life in general. But as is the internet, that's kind of what happens, right? So take some of that information with a grain of salt, kind of use that the information that you might get there and compare it to other people's comments, see if it is reflective of or consistent with what other people are saying, what other maybe professionals or podcasters or writers have to say. The vast majority of therapists that I would say are good, and maybe this just reflects my bias, but I think I'm right in some of this stuff, but what I was going to say was the vast majority of the therapists that I respect, we're all kind of saying the same stuff, and that's because a lot of the stuff that we are espousing and support and are backed up by research and backed up by our own clinical experience. So you want to be looking at things that are going to be consistent across these platforms and across these voices. So the other thing that someone can do if you are trying to access information, the IOCDF, International OCD Foundation.org, is a great resource. They have a ton of information from top therapists and top researchers. You can also just find some books. I mean, the library is going to be great, as I've mentioned on previous podcasts. If you go to your local library, they may have some OCD books there. There may be some now, and by the way, there may be also digital resources there too. So sometimes a library online will have a ton of different books. At least it does in our area. You can go. I use Overdrive, the app. So it's just called Overdrive, but it connects to my local library, and if I use my library card there, I have access to all of their digital their digital library. And sometimes I'll look for a book that they just don't have, and I request that they buy it. There's usually that option on there. I request they buy it, and you know what? Sometimes they do, and they send me a little notice. Hey, we have this book now. Great. I'll get it, and I'll be able to read it in that way. So used books are going to be a great option as well. So there's a ton of information that's out there, and I encourage everybody who is having trouble accessing a therapist to look into some of these other means. If you have, by the way, I think this might be a topic for a future episode. If you have a resource that you really like, maybe I'll do a whole episode just on great resources. So if you have a great book or blog or video series, things like that. I should also say Nathan Peterson's YouTube series is also fantastic, so check that out. But if you have a resource that you love, send that over to me. Go over to fearcastpodcast.com, or again, find me on the Instagrams at Fearcast Podcast. Send it to me there. I should do an episode like that. Anyways, so on to your question. So you said I became obsessed with my ERP. Now, I'm stoked. I'm so excited that you have, in the midst of all the pandemic, are working to face your obsessions. You said you're cutting down on hand washing. Awesome. Everyone should be cutting down on their hand washing. And I know that sounds crazy to say in the midst of a pandemic, but you know what? There are times that we can wash our hands. There are times that we ultimately don't need to. But you caught yourself, listener, washing your hands way too stinking much. So you progressively started pulling that back. And you did the same thing with reading. You found yourself rereading over and over again. And by the way, that's a common obsession that people can have across the board. If you're not aware of it, everybody, some folks will get obsessed about, as they're reading, that they have to go back and reread lines, reread pages, reread words, make sure they read it slowly so they get all the information. So they are acquiring all the information that could be attained from that sentence or page so that they don't miss out on something. And sometimes the threat can be, well, if I missed one bit of information, that bit of information could be the key to my problem or the key to my success in some area. But just like what you did, caller, you didn't go back and you took the risk to maybe miss information, and you took the risk to miss information on labels. Great. That's what you ought to be doing, because we might miss information. And that brings me to the point. You had said, I'm starting to obsess about my treatment, about ERP. So we call this obsessing about obsessing. This is kind of ruminating and thinking and pondering and trying to figure out treatment to do it right. Very often it comes out as needing to know exactly what the right steps are to eliminate OCD, or what the right things are to do that are through that are research-based, and that what every therapist would say and what the right thing to do that would be the most effective treatment method and execution of that treatment. Now, this has a broad range of what it could mean for you. So for some people, it can mean doing exactly what their therapist said. So sometimes I'll work with folks and they'll say, Kevin, how long should I read this? And I'll say, I want you to read your script for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour a day, whatever else that I said at the moment. I want you to read it for this amount of time. They go, great. And they come back and they write it for that exact amount of time. No more, no less. Or they'll want to know, all right, Kevin, I'm supposed to, if I'm supposed to go walk through 10 doors today without going back. So they will ask me, are you sure 10? 10's the right one. Yes, do 10. So they only walk through 10 and they go way out of their way. They cause problems in their life. They struggle to do all the homework exactly the way I assigned it. Because the idea is, if I do exactly what Kevin says, I will get better. If I do exactly what Kevin says, I will eliminate OCD and I will be free of this. Now, it's understandable, right? Someone goes into ERP process. Someone calls me to get better. They don't call me for fun. I'm not that fun. So they're calling me and hanging out with me and working with me for a reason. You, caller, are trying to go through ERP to get better. But when OCD latches on to that, it starts to become that all or nothing, black and white, perfectionistic sort of approach. Am I doing all the things I need to do to get better? What if, and here's that magic term, right? What if I'm doing something wrong? What if I'm doing it not enough? What if I'm doing it way too much? Am I spending way too much time thinking about my obsessions? Or am I spending way too much time doing ERP? Should I be doing less amount of it? Because you can, in a sense, do too much. And I say that, and I'm hesitant to even say it, because all of these situations are very individual. There may be someone that I work with where I'm going to say, you need to do more ERP. And that's going to be for a specific reason. There are going to be other people where I'm going to say, boy, we need to pull back on this. You're spending way too much time on it. And that person, it may be because they are making their whole world about this, or that they're not taking the risk in between things or between the exposures to go live their life. I think ultimately within that, it's that giving someone the opportunity to experience the consequences of their behaviors, or the consequences of their actions. And ultimately that person might be doing exposures as compulsions. I had a client back in the day call these compulsions as exposures. Exposures as compulsions. Doing an exposure with the idea that I'm doing this to be better and to feel better. Anyways, so being obsessed about your obsessions, about ERP, is somewhat common. One of the main things to do with this is to accept the possibility that maybe you're not doing all the right things. Maybe you're going to do what the book says. You're going to do what this podcast says. You're going to do whatever else that it is that you find as given it as advice. And maybe you're not going to get better. Or maybe you're going to do it wrong and therefore not get better. Or maybe you found bad information. Whatever it may be, maybe something has happened that's going to leave you tortured by OCD for the rest of your life. Now, if this sounds like how I talk about scripting, it's because it kind of is. This is ultimately just another obsession, no different. Your previous thought was, well, what if I'm not washing my hands enough? So I should wash my hands to make sure I perhaps don't get sick. Maybe I should reread this information so that I get all the information so that I don't miss out on something, so I don't fail at something. Maybe I need to do treatment the right way so that I never get better, or so I do get better, so that I can finally be free and get back to my life. And that thought of then being stuck in OCD for the rest of your life sounds horrible. And I get it. It's horrible. But if you're then doing compulsions, you're just reinforcing this thought as something that is terrible and frightening and deserves attention and deserves all of the energy in your life. At the end of the day, we're accepting risk. We're accepting danger and not knowing. We don't know. If you do the exposures, if you will 100% get better. I have confidence in doing ERP and being a therapist for the many years that I have, that people do get better from doing these treatments. However, OCDs might creep in, as it does, and say, yeah, but what if you don't get fully better? Then what? Then your life is screwed and ruined and terrible and awful and sad. And that can be the fuel to go back and to wash more. But you already said, I'm not going to do that. So it's to do exposures more and harder. In situations like this, I might suggest someone decide that they're going to be done at some point, meaning that they're going to do exposures, but they're not going to do it for a specified amount of time. That they're going to read their script, but they're not going to do it for a specified amount of, for a specified amount of time. But they're just going to read it a couple of times. And then they're going to sit with that uncertainty that maybe they did the wrong amount. Or I'll even assign someone to say, all right, I want you to read it for 30 minutes, but I don't want you to read it for 30 minutes. I know that's confusing directions, but that's the point. I want them to read it for 30 minutes, but not read it for 30 minutes. Maybe they're going to read it for 29 minutes, or maybe they're going to read it for 31 minutes. And either way, or they're going to read it for 10 minutes or for an hour and a half. I don't know. Maybe they're going to ruin it. But that's that feeling that person needs to sit with. So my encouragement for you would be to number one, be open to being wrong. Be open to being wrong. We can be wrong and things still can work out. That sounds crazy for a lot of folks, but think about what that feels like to do things wrong. Acknowledge where that feeling is, acknowledge what that sense is that it feels like it's wrong. But also to remember that feeling wrong is okay. That feeling that you get feels scary and your brain goes, but we've been trying to do it right for all this time, and you asked us to focus on doing it right this whole time. Great. Practice tolerating the feeling of being wrong. Secondly, I want you to do exposures, but do them wrong. Do them incorrectly. Wash the wrong amount of time, wash in the wrong way, wash in a weird way, and be open to it not feeling complete or not feeling correct as, quote, an exposure ought to, if that's the way it is. But you're going to wash an inconsistent amount of time. Continue on doing the things that you're doing, but resist the urge to do the exposures that you are self-assigning correctly. And then sit with the double fear that maybe you are going to miss out on the information, maybe you're going to catch COVID, and maybe you're never going to get better from OCD. It's just another thing to tolerate, another element of anxiety and uncertainty to make space for in your day, and accept the existential fear that maybe it's all going to go south, and then move on with your day. And then just keep going. Say, yep, I did it wrong. Well, maybe it's all ruined. Well, what else can I do with my day? Well, I guess I'll go get some food. Maybe I'll go watch some TV. Maybe I'll go do push-ups and juggle. I don't know. But you're going to move on and go do something else and wait for the fallout and tolerate the time between right now and the time that the fallout occurs. And the fallout may occur, it may never occur. But we're acknowledging that, yeah, sometimes we're going to get those thoughts that come in. We're going to place those to the side. We're not going to solve the problem, get the reassurance, get the answer. Instead, refocus just back on what it is that you're doing and keep moving forward. Not getting stuck in trying to get perfect with your exposures. So I hope that answers your question, and send us a question back or send us a response back to see how that's working, what's not working, and we'll all be interested to hear. So thanks again for the question, and best of luck. All right, so I'll keep this quick. So this last question today comes from Lynn again. So they said, how do you respond when people misuse OCD, or when they don't understand that it's more than just being a perfectionist or just liking things a certain way? Like the quote, I'm so OCD. So how do I respond to that? So I totally get that. All that stuff is super duper annoying, because it is. So here's what I do, and I've done this a couple of times. So on Facebook, primarily this is what has happened on Facebook, and I've done this maybe once or twice in real life. So if I see someone on Facebook, one of my dumb friends, and they put up a thing about OCD, or I'm so OCD, or they put up a one of those links to a BuzzFeed quiz that is like, oh, someone with OCD, or only someone with OCD can detect the differences between these two balls, or these two circles, or I don't know, something like that. I'll sometimes respond back just with a simple comment about, hey, just so you know, this test does not actually detect OCD. And by the way, OCD is a mental health disorder marked by significant distress related to intrusive thoughts, feelings, images, sensations, or urges, followed by compulsive thoughts, actions, rituals, routines, or avoidances to try to alleviate that anxiety. Now you know, have a good day. It's something simple like that. It's nothing too crazy. That may sound crazy to you. That's also totally fine. But that's typically what I do. And because I don't want to beat them over the head, I don't want to shame them into getting on board with it, getting on board with what OCD actually is. I just want to educate them and just tell them what it actually is, and that it's not, just being a perfectionist, because OCD can have a perfectionistic element to it, right? OCD can be washing your hands. OCD can be being hyper aware of things. Right. I know there's some OCPD elements in there that I mentioned, or it could be extrapolated to that. But I hope you all know what I mean in this. So I'll just try to offer this bit of education. Now it's up to them to either ask a follow-up question, or to learn on their own, or to continue in their ignorance. And it's frustrating if that's true. And sometimes if they come back with the same sort of ignorant comment, I might message them again. Hey, you know what? I know this comment seems totally funny, but you know what? Actually, that comment about OCD is a little inaccurate. Hey, remember when I mentioned that here's what OCD actually is? Just as a reminder. Now, this might seem very, passive aggressive or snarky or whatever the case may be, but that's what I will often do. Now, if that's something that you'd be willing to do, fantastic. If it is leading you to anger, then that may be something to work out on your own. Pull back from the comment, because oftentimes in a situation where if we're feeling angry, or if we're feeling particularly hurt, we may not respond in a way that is going to express the message that we want. And it's during that I would encourage you to take a break, pull back, and to maybe both. Wait for that feeling to start coming down. Think about what is it about that that's making you feel so angry. You can process that with a friend, family member, a therapist, and we're going to wait. We're going to wait until our reasonable mind comes back, and then if you want to, if it's reasonable, if it's safe, to craft our responses, and then message them and express to them kind of like what I mentioned to the other person. It's also not our responsibility to educate the entire world. We don't need to be the OCD police for everybody. Some people are just going to be obnoxious and ignorant, and there ain't nothing that we can do about that. And it's upsetting, sure, but it's not incumbent upon us to fix everybody and everything. If you feel that you want to take the opportunity to respond to somebody, you're welcome to do it, but you don't have to. Sometimes it's better for us to pull back and just roll our eyes at this person who just doesn't get it, and to move on. It's also helpful to remember that person is probably also going to make comments about depression or bipolar disorder, or they're going to make comments about, they're all over the place. So, I'm so schizophrenic today, right? Or, I was so scared I'm going to have a heart attack today, right? Or various other physical health concerns, right? I'm going to eat so much candy today, I'm just going to turn into a diabetic. right? Or, I had such a headache, I feel like I'm going to have an aneurysm, right? All those things can be very triggering to someone whose family member had suffered an aneurysm, who individually has schizophrenia, who, you get the idea. Some people just make these rude comments, thoughtless comments. And, I've made those comments before, and I'm not, I just go like, oh man, I'm gonna say, oh, those jerks, they should, whatever, we should shame them. And then in 10 years from now, it's going to be surfaced that I, said something on Facebook that was wildly inappropriate, and I'm certain that it has. Something that I said in college or graduate school or after or yesterday, I don't know. That's where my crazy brain goes. Where did yours go? Anyways, so that would be some of my thoughts on this. That's how I would respond to it, and I don't know how you would respond to it. As a follow-up, everybody, I want to know how you respond. Go over to fearcastpodcast.com. Send me a message. How do you respond when someone misuses OCD? Ugh, I'm so OCD. Or the, ever popular right now, obsessive Christmas disorder. What do you do? So go over and send me a message over there. Send me a message over at Fearcast Podcast at Instagram. I want to know. And if I get enough of them, I'll put them up as comments on a future episode. So thank you so much for that question. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for making it through this episode. Hopefully this one was tight. Hopefully it was clean. Hopefully it made sense. And hopefully it was helpful to everybody out there. So again, everybody, if you have questions for Mitzi Van Cleve for a future Christmas scrupulosity episode, go over to fearcastpodcast.com or over at Instagram. You can send them to me there. If you have an audio question you want to send me, go over to send them to questions@fearcastpodcast.com or send me a shared drive link over at fearcastpodcast.com. So, everybody, please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you have questions about treatment and need a little bit of assistance in your recovery, go over to fearcastpodcast.com. There's going to be the Find Help link, and there's going to be some links up there that may be helpful for you. So, until next time, everybody, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.